My name is Emily, and I'm 32 years old. This is the story of how my parents celebrated my sister's success, a success I knew was built on lies and secret debt, while I was silently drowning in my own struggles. What happened that night, when I finally spoke the truth, changed everything between us. If you've ever felt invisible, or like your own pain was dismissed while someone else was praised for something you knew wasn't the full picture, please let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if this story resonates with you, if you've had to stand up to family members who refuse to see your truth, please hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics and finding your voice. Growing up, my sister Sarah was always the golden child. She was 2 years older than me, charismatic, effortlessly popular, and seemed to glide through life, while I felt like I was constantly pushing against a strong current. Our parents adored her. Every achievement, no matter how small, was met with effusive praise, elaborate celebrations, and proud announcements to their friends and family. My own achievements, even significant ones, were often met with a nod, a brief word, or sometimes a comparison to Sarah that left me feeling less than. For example, I remember winning a regional science fair in high school. I had poured months into my project, sacrificing weekends and staying up late. It was a genuine passion project about environmental conservation. When I came home with the first place ribbon and the small scholarship prize, my parents were pleased, I suppose. My father said, "Oh, that's nice, Emily." "Very good," my mother added. "That's wonderful, dear. Did you tell Sarah? She was just accepted into the accelerated business program at university. Isn't that exciting?" There was no big dinner, no proud social media posts like the one they'd crafted for Sarah's university acceptance, just a swift pivot back to the narrative of Sarah's brilliance. It was a pattern that repeated itself endlessly throughout my childhood and into adulthood. Sarah's triumphs were family triumphs, celebrated publicly and loudly. My successes were quiet, personal milestones, acknowledged briefly if at all. It wasn't just the big things. Sarah could charm her way out of anything. If she forgot to do a chore, it was because she was so busy or had so much on her plate. If I forgot, I was irresponsible or lazy. If she spent money impulsively, it was her treat or she deserved it. If I made a careful purchase, I was lectured about saving and being practical. The narrative was always molded to cast Sarah in a favorable light, minimizing any flaws, while my imperfections were magnified and used as evidence of my inherent lack of something: ambition, responsibility, charm. I could never quite pinpoint what I supposedly lacked, but the feeling of deficiency was ever present. This constant contrast created a deep-seated insecurity within me. I tried to be the perfect daughter in other ways: quieter, more obedient, less demanding. I excelled academically, followed rules, and tried to be helpful around the house, hoping that my quiet diligence might earn me some of the same unreserved affection and pride they showered on Sarah. But it never felt like enough. Their eyes, their attention, their deepest admiration seemed perpetually fixed on her. As we grew older, the dynamic solidified. Sarah pursued a career in finance, a field that impressed our parents immensely. They loved telling people about her demanding job, the long hours she worked, the deals she was supposedly closing. It all sounded very important and high-powered. I pursued a career in education, becoming a high school teacher. While I found my work deeply rewarding and felt I was making a real difference in my students' lives, it wasn't seen as nearly as prestigious or financially successful as Sarah's path. "Oh, Emily's a teacher," my mother would say at family gatherings, often followed by, "It's a lovely job for her. Bless her heart. But, not quite the fast-paced world Sarah's," and the implicit message was clear. My career was sweet and suitable. Sarah's was impressive and ambitious. My own life had its share of difficulties. I struggled financially for a few years, navigating student loan debt and the modest salary of a new teacher in a city with a high cost of living. I went through a painful breakup that left me emotionally drained. I had health issues that required treatment and recovery time. Through all of this, my parents were present, but distantly so. Their help was often conditional, laced with criticism. or delivered with a sigh that made me feel like a burden. I remember one particular conversation when I was trying to save for a down payment on a small condo. I was working extra hours, tutoring on the side, and cutting every non-essential expense. I mentioned my goal to my mother, hoping for encouragement. Instead, she said, "A condo, Emily? Are you sure you can afford that? Maybe you should think smaller." Sarah says the property market is very volatile right now. She knows about these things, being in finance. Have you asked her for advice? It wasn't advice. It was a veiled dismissal of my efforts and another reinforcement of Sarah's superior judgment and knowledge. Meanwhile, Sarah seemed to be living a charmed life, at least from the outside. She lived in a trendy apartment in the city, went on expensive vacations, wore designer clothes, and always seemed to have the latest gadgets. Our parents pointed to her lifestyle as proof of her success, her financial acumen, her ability to thrive. "Look at Sarah," my father would say. "She knows how to manage her money. She's making it work." They were so proud of her apparent prosperity. My first inkling that something was not quite right with Sarah's picture-perfect life came subtly. She would occasionally make offhand comments about needing cash quickly or mention a temporary bridge loan she was taking out. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was just part of managing a complex financial life in the city, perhaps related to investments or business ventures I didn't understand. The truth began to unravel about 6 months before the celebration that became the breaking point. I was visiting my parents, and my mother asked me if I could help her sort through some old boxes in the attic. While doing so, I stumbled upon a box labeled "Sarah, Important Documents." It felt wrong to look, but a knot of curiosity and an old, familiar feeling of being excluded from Sarah's important life compelled me. I rationalized it by telling myself I was just making sure everything was organized and safe. Inside the box, among old school reports and university acceptance letters, were stacks of unopened mail. And not just junk mail. There were official-looking envelopes from banks, credit card companies, and something that looked like a loan servicing company. The envelopes were all addressed to Sarah at various previous addresses, but they had been forwarded to my parents' house, where they had clearly piled up, ignored. My heart started to beat faster as I carefully opened a few. The contents were shocking. Statements showing astronomical balances on multiple credit cards. Overdue notices for personal loans. A letter from a debt collection agency with threatening language. The total amount wasn't immediately clear, but from what I could see, it was tens of thousands of dollars. This wasn't just a little debt. This was crippling debt. My mind reeled. How could this be? Sarah, the financial whiz, the one who supposedly knew how to manage money better than anyone, was drowning in debt? It completely contradicted the image she presented, the image my parents so proudly showcased. It suddenly cast her expensive lifestyle, her trendy apartment, her vacations, in a completely different light. It wasn't funded by success. It was funded by borrowing. I felt a complex mix of emotions: shock, confusion, a strange sense of vindication that the golden child wasn't so perfect after all, but also worry for her. More than anything, I felt deeply unsettled by the secrecy and the contrast between this hidden reality and the public facade. I carefully put the documents back, resealing the envelopes as best I could, and placed the box exactly as I had found it. My mind was racing for the rest of the visit. I wanted to talk to my parents, to show them what I found, but I hesitated. How would they react? Would they thank me for bringing this to their attention, concerned about Sarah? Or would they turn it back on me, accuse me of snooping, and defend Sarah, perhaps claiming it was a misunderstanding or a temporary setback? Given their history, I suspected the latter. I also considered talking to Sarah directly. But I knew her. She was fiercely private, especially about anything that might tarnish her image. Confronting her would likely lead to denial, anger, and accusations that I was jealous or trying to sabotage her. I wasn't ready for that confrontation, not yet. For weeks, I carried this secret like a heavy weight. I watched my parents continue to praise Sarah's supposed financial success, completely oblivious. I saw Sarah post pictures of herself on another glamorous trip, funded, I now knew, by more debt. The hypocrisy was suffocating. It felt like I was living in a parallel reality, seeing the truth that no one else acknowledged. During this time, my own life was particularly challenging. The health issue I mentioned earlier had flared up again, requiring expensive treatment that my insurance didn't fully cover. I was facing unexpected medical bills and trying to manage them on my teacher's salary, which felt more inadequate than ever. The stress of my health, the financial strain, and the burden of Sarah's secret were crushing. I felt overwhelmed, vulnerable, and deeply alone. There were days I would come home from a long day at school, deal with a painful medical appointment, and then see a social media post from Sarah about a fancy dinner or a new luxury item, followed by a text from my mother praising Sarah's hard work and how she deserves nice things. It felt like a physical blow each time. Here I was, struggling with my health and trying to stay afloat financially through sheer discipline and sacrifice, while my sister was celebrated for a life built on unstable foundations, all while I was carrying the knowledge of her hidden struggles and my own very real ones. I felt a profound sense of unfairness. Not just about the favoritism, which was old news, but about the narrative of success. My parents valued financial achievement above all else, and Sarah had mastered the art of performing that success, even if it wasn't real. My genuine struggles, my hard work, my responsible choices felt invisible and unvalued in comparison. I cried many nights during this period, feeling unseen, unappreciated, and increasingly resentful. Then came the announcement. Sarah had been offered a major promotion at her finance firm. My parents were ecstatic. It was framed as a huge leap forward in her career, proof of her talent and dedication. They decided to host a large party to celebrate her success. Invitations went out to extended family friends, colleagues, anyone they could proudly tell about Sarah's latest achievement. The planning for the party consumed my parents. They talked about nothing else. My mother called me several times a day to discuss decorations, the menu, the guest list, comparing everything to Sarah's elevated status. "We have to make sure it's elegant enough," she'd say. Sarah's colleagues are very successful people. During one of these calls, I tried, gently, to mention my own struggles. I was facing a particularly large medical bill and was stressed about how to pay it. I hoped for a little empathy, maybe just an acknowledgement of my difficulty. Instead, my mother sighed. "Oh, Emily, honestly, can't you just manage? Everyone has bills. Don't worry so much. You need to focus on being happy for Sarah right now." This is a very important milestone for her. The dismissal was immediate and absolute. My problems were a nuisance, a distraction from the main event, Sarah's triumph. That conversation solidified something in me. The deep well of hurt and resentment I had carried for years, exacerbated by the secret I held, boiled over. I looked at the date of the party, just a few weeks away, and knew I couldn't sit there, smiling, while they lauded her fake success, especially when my own real struggles were being ignored and belittled. The party was held in my parents' house. They had gone all out. The house was decorated beautifully, caterers were hired, and a large banner hung over the fireplace proclaiming, "Congratulations, Sarah, on your promotion." As guests arrived, my parents beamed, introducing Sarah and recounting her impressive career trajectory. Sarah played her part perfectly, smiling, accepting congratulations gracefully, talking about her exciting new responsibilities. She looked the picture of success, dressed impeccably, confident and polished. I arrived feeling emotionally raw and physically tired from my ongoing health issues. I tried to blend into the background, making small talk, observing the scene. Every praise heaped upon Sarah felt like a fresh stab. My father gave a speech, raising a glass to Sarah, talking about how proud he was of her ambition, her intelligence, her financial savvy. My mother followed, her voice thick with emotion, detailing all of Sarah's wonderful qualities and achievements, painting a picture of a perfect daughter who had overcome every obstacle through sheer brilliance. They talked about her bright future, her potential for even greater success. As they spoke, I felt a familiar wave of invisibility wash over me. My existence in that moment felt reduced to Sarah's sister, No mention of me, my life, my work, my struggles, my small victories. It was all about her, the golden child, bathed in the glow of their unconditional admiration. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the foundation of this celebration was a lie. The knot in my stomach tightened. The air felt thick, suffocating. I looked at Sarah, smiling serenely, accepting her accolades. I looked at my parents, their faces alight with pride, completely blind. And I looked at myself, standing in the corner, my recent hospital visits, my pile of medical bills, my quiet dedication to my students, all utterly unseen. The unfairness of it was unbearable. My mother finished her speech, and a round of applause filled the room. People started milling around, congratulating Sarah again. My parents were circulating, accepting compliments on their daughter's success. I don't know exactly what snapped. Maybe it was the combination of my own pain, the injustice of the situation, the feeling of being erased, and the knowledge of the truth. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a sudden, fierce need to shatter the illusion, to make them see, just for a moment, the reality beneath the carefully constructed facade. I walked towards the center of the room, where Sarah was holding court, surrounded by a group of impressed-looking guests. My parents were nearby, talking to some friends. My hands were trembling slightly. My voice was quiet at first, but it grew stronger as I spoke. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the polite chatter. A few people turned to look at me. Sarah turned, her smile faltering slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. My parents also looked over, a mixture of confusion and mild irritation on their faces, as if wondering why I was interrupting Sarah's moment. "I just wanted to add something," I continued, my eyes fixed on my parents. "It's wonderful that everyone is celebrating Sarah's promotion tonight. She's worked very hard to present this image of success. The emphasis I placed on present this image was subtle, but deliberate." My father frowned. "Emily, what is it? Your sister is being congratulated." "Yes, I know," I said, my voice gaining firmness. "And I think it's important for everyone here, especially Mom and Dad, to understand what that success is really built on." Sarah's eyes widened, and the color drained from her face. She took a small step back from the group around her. My mother's hand went to her chest. "Emily, what are you talking about?" my mother asked, her tone sharp, laced with immediate defensiveness on Sarah's behalf. "I'm talking about truth," I said, my voice steady now, cutting through the growing silence in the room. More and more people were turning to watch. "You're celebrating Sarah's financial success, her knowledge of money, her ability to thrive." I looked directly at my parents. "But you don't know the truth, do you? You don't know about the tens of thousands of dollars in debt she's accumulated, the maxed-out credit cards, the overdue loans, the calls from debt collectors." A gasp went through the room. Sarah looked like she might faint. My parents stared at me, their faces a mask of shock and disbelief, quickly turning to fury. "Emily, how dare you?" my father roared, taking a step towards me. "What kind of cruel lie is this?" "It's not a lie," I said, my voice cracking slightly, but I pushed through. "I found the unopened mail at your house, Mom. Statements, final notices. It's all there. While you were lecturing me about saving for a down payment and telling me I couldn't afford a condo, while you were dismissing my own financial struggles with medical bills, Sarah was hiding massive debt." My mother looked from me to Sarah, her eyes darting between us, searching for confirmation or denial. Sarah stood frozen, tears welling up in her eyes, not of remorse, I suspected, but of being exposed. "This is impossible," my mother whispered, shaking her head. "Sarah, is this true?" Sarah finally found her voice, but it wasn't to confess. It was to attack. "Emily, you had no right. You went through my things. You're just jealous. You're always jealous," she shrieked, stepping forward, her face contorted with rage. "Jealous," I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Jealous of crippling debt? Jealous of pretending to be something you're not?" "No, Sarah, I'm not jealous. I'm hurt. I'm hurt that mom and dad dismiss my actual life and struggles while celebrating your carefully constructed fantasy. I'm hurt that the truth is so different from the story you tell everyone, and that they believe it so completely while they barely see me. My father grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. That is enough, Emily. You have ruined this party. You have embarrassed your sister and your mother and me in front of all our guests. Ruined it. I pulled my arm away. Or exposed the truth. You celebrate her for being financially savvy, for being successful, while she's hiding a mountain of debt she can't manage. And you can't even acknowledge my own struggles, my own efforts to be responsible, because it doesn't fit the narrative of your two daughters, the golden child and the whatever I am in your eyes. The room was completely silent now, everyone watching the unfolding drama. My parents looked torn between their ingrained need to protect Sarah and their shock at the information I had revealed. "This is not the time or place, Emily," my mother said, her voice tight with anger and humiliation. "When is the time, Mom?" I asked, my voice softer now, but no less intense. "When do my feelings matter? When do my struggles get seen? Never. It's always about Sarah. Always about her success, real or fake." Sarah began to cry harder, making dramatic, heaving sobs. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, some looking sympathetic towards Sarah, others watching me with wide eyes. "Look what you've done," my mother cried, rushing to Sarah's side and putting an arm around her. "You've upset your sister terribly." "I upset her by telling the truth," I asked, incredulous. "Or is she upset because her secret is out?" My father, recovering his composure, turned to the guests with a forced smile. "Apologies, everyone, just a little family misunderstanding. Nothing to worry about." He gave me a look that promised repercussions later. "Emily, I think you should leave. Now." The pain of hearing those words, of being cast out for speaking the truth, was profound. But beneath the pain was a strange sense of liberation. I had done it. I had finally shattered the silence. I had forced the hidden reality into the light, even if only for a moment. "Fine," I said, my voice firm. "I'll leave. But you can't unhear what I said. And you can't unsee those bills." I turned and walked towards the door, acutely aware of every eye on me. As I reached the door, I heard my mother say, "She's just unstable, you know. Going through a lot right now. Don't pay her any mind." That lie, that immediate gaslighting and dismissal of my words as instability, was the final straw. It confirmed everything. My truth would always be twisted to protect Sarah and their perfect family image. I walked out of the house and into the cool night air, leaving the sounds of the awkwardly resuming party behind. Tears streamed down my face, a mix of pain, anger, and the sheer exhaustion of years of carrying that burden. I had been crying for weeks before that party, but those tears were silent, private, born of my own struggles and the injustice I witnessed. These tears were different. They were loud, public, and marked a turning point. The immediate aftermath was brutal. My parents didn't contact me for days. When my father finally called, his voice was cold and hard. There was no concern for me, no acknowledgement of Sarah's debt, only anger at my behavior. He accused me of being malicious, jealous, and ruining a special occasion. He said I had deeply hurt my mother and Sarah. There was no apology, no attempt to understand, only demands for one from me. I refused. I told him I wouldn't apologize for telling the truth, even if it was uncomfortable. The call ended with him saying he was very disappointed in me and needed time to process my attack on the family. Sarah texted me, not to discuss the debt, but to curse me out. She called me every name imaginable, accused me of trying to destroy her life, and reiterated that I was a bitter, jealous loser. There was no remorse, no admission of her deception. This response, while painful, wasn't surprising. It was confirmation that they were more invested in maintaining the facade than dealing with the underlying issues. It became clear that my speaking the truth wasn't going to magically heal the family or lead to some heartfelt reckoning. Instead, it had drawn a line in the sand. For several months, communication was minimal and strained. My parents would send curt texts about unrelated matters or relay messages through other relatives. Every interaction felt laced with unspoken resentment and judgment. Sarah stopped speaking to me entirely. It was painful, the silence and the coldness, but it also created space I desperately needed. During this time, I focused on myself. I continued managing my health issues and navigating the medical bills. I leaned on a few close friends who listened without judgment and validated my feelings. I started therapy, which was incredibly helpful. My therapist helped me understand the family dynamics I had grown up in, the pattern of favoritism, the reasons why I felt invisible, and why I had carried the burden of Sarah's secret for so long. She helped me see that my value wasn't dependent on my parents' or Sarah's approval, and that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for my own well-being. I worked through the guilt I felt about ruining the party and embarrassing my family. My therapist helped me reframe the event not as an act of destruction, but an act of self-preservation and truth-telling. It was messy, it was painful, but it was authentic in a way my family's interactions rarely were. Slowly, tentatively, I started setting boundaries. I stopped answering every call and text immediately. I declined invitations to family gatherings that felt like they would be emotionally unsafe or centered solely around Sarah. When I did interact, I kept conversations brief and focused on neutral topics. I refused to engage when my parents made veiled criticisms or tried to bring up the past incident. It was difficult. There were times I felt lonely, missing the idea of the family I wished I had. There were moments of doubt, wondering if I had handled things the right way. But each time I stood firm, each time I chose my own peace over their expectations or demands, I felt a little stronger. About a year after the party, my parents reached out, suggesting we try to move forward. The initial conversations were awkward. They still didn't fully acknowledge the extent of Sarah's debt or their role in enabling the facade. They still focused more on my actions at the party than the reasons behind them. But they were willing to talk, which was a start. Sarah eventually reached out too, not with a full apology, but a hesitant admission that she had made some mistakes. It was a small step, but it showed a crack in her defensiveness. We haven't had a deep conversation about everything that happened, and I don't know if we ever will. The trust was broken on many levels. Our family dynamic is permanently changed. It's not the close-knit, traditional family unit we once were or perhaps pretended to be. Relationships are more cautious, conversations less free-flowing. There's an acknowledged distance, a recognition that certain topics are off-limits. It's not the picture-perfect outcome you might see in a movie, but it's more honest. Sarah is reportedly working to pay down her debt, though I don't know the details. My parents have subtly shifted their public narrative about her, focusing more on her perseverance and overcoming challenges than on her effortless success. It's a small shift, but I notice it. For my part, I am in a much better place. My health is stable. I'm still teaching and finding immense satisfaction in my work. I've saved diligently and was finally able to buy that small condo entirely on my own terms, without asking for or needing their approval. It wasn't easy, but it felt incredibly empowering. The biggest change is within me. I no longer crave their validation the way I once did. I no longer feel invisible. I know my worth, independent of their praise or criticism. I understand that their inability to fully see or appreciate me was a reflection of their own issues and the dynamics they created, not a reflection of my inadequacy. Speaking the truth that night was terrifying, and it had painful consequences. But it was also necessary. It allowed me to stop living a lie, to stop participating in a narrative that erased me, and to start building a life based on my own reality and values. It was the first step towards reclaiming my voice and my identity. Looking back, while I wouldn't wish that night on anyone, I don't regret it. It forced a necessary reckoning, however incomplete, and it freed me from the performance I had been trapped in for so long. It taught me that sometimes the truth, even when delivered imperfectly, is the most powerful tool you have, and that protecting your own peace and integrity is more important than maintaining a false harmony. So that's my story. It's a story about family, secrets, and the painful, necessary process of finding your voice when you've been silenced. It's a story about how the truth can be messy and uncomfortable, but ultimately liberating. If you've been through something similar, if you've had to challenge a family narrative or stand up for yourself even when it felt impossible, please share your experience in the comments below. You are not alone. If this story resonated with you, if you understand the feeling of being overlooked or the pain of familial betrayal, please hit that like button. It helps me know that sharing these difficult stories is worthwhile. And if you want to hear more stories about navigating toxic relationships, setting boundaries, and finding your strength, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Thank you for listening to my truth. Remember to speak yours and value your own worth.